to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This week, I want to talk about one of my favorite comic book artists, writers, comic book creators ever, Barry Windsor-Smith. If you don't recognize the name, it's because he hasn't really worked on anything, super mainstream or for a super long time. There's no huge run that Barry Windsor-Smith worked on. There's no, Superman to point to or Batman run or anything like that. That is, outside of his work on Conan the Barbarian, which starts way back in 1970. And you can see here what an influence Jack Kirby had on the young Barry Windsor-Smith, who was then just known as Barry Smith. He isn't even double-barreled yet. Just from these action poses and the way he's, sort of squaring off all of his edges, you can really tell this is a student of Jack Kirby. But what I want to show you today is kind of the progressive steps Barry Windsor-Smith takes from these early issues of Conan the Barbarian to the one I'm going to show you today, where his art style has already developed in such a way that it's become its own thing. He's really become an artist in and of himself and stepped out of that Jack Kirby shadow. He's been in and out of mainstream comics almost for his entire career, and it's a really interesting case in his case, because he's a guy with the most skill, an unbelievable ability that we don't see enough of in comics. And when we do see him, he's such a master that you just want more. And I think some of the best stuff he ever did, is some of the best comics ever made. And I want this video to be just a piece of a longer series of episodes talking about Barry Windsor-Smith and some of the great moments of his career, and kind of just looking at the progression that he had as an artist over time. I think it's incredible. The place I want to start today, if you didn't get the reference in my intro, is with Conan the Barbarian, who is one of my favorite fictional characters ever in any form. And I think Robert E. Howard's, real pulp sword and sorcery writings, all the way back in the 1930s, are extremely influential, and they have been going forward, and they're really influential on me, even as somebody who likes to be creative, who likes to write and things like that. The worlds of Conan the Barbarian and the characters that he creates and stuff, how mythological and mystical and fantastical and dark and otherworldly. I think that's amazing, and I think nobody brought it to life as well as Barry Windsor-Smith did in the early 70s. So let's dive into some Conan right now. Let's take a look and I'll tell you all about it. Now, I have this collection here, The Savage Sword of Conan, on an old paperback compendium back when the rights for Conan were with Dark Horse. You can see the Dark Horse logo on there. I don't know, the rights to Conan have gone back and forth so many times, it's hard to keep track of, but it originally starts out as a Marvel book. And what we're gonna see here isn't the original Conan the Barbarian series that Barry Windsor-Smith worked on as Barry Smith. He didn't even have the Windsor yet in his name, right? I think that's symbolically really cool, that he doesn't have the Windsor, he's not double-barreled yet. Just that's an interesting little evolution that he goes through. And by the way, I should mention, the cover of this compendium is friggin' how cool is that? Look how awesome, look at that face Conan the Barbarian has and the rigid way he's kind of standing up. You can just, there's a whole story to be written here. Every picture is worth 1,000 words. There's several thousand words in this moment. Boris Vallejo does the cover here. It's friggin' really cool. But where we're going is actually not, like I said, to Conan the Barbarian, that original series, but is to Savage Tales of Conan the Barbarian. Now, the book is called Savage Sword of Conan, which is, again, another title. The thing about comics in the old days, in the 70s and before that, was that there was a comics code. And the comics code said, hey, comics are for kids. You can't show us terrible violence. You can't show us don't even suggest nudity or sexuality. Hey, those words, zombies and vampire, not allowed. Mafia even became the magia or muggia or whatever. I can't remember exactly. But the comics code was very strict in what you could and couldn't do. And the workaround, like, I mean, look at that John Buscema cover right there, speaking of violence. The workaround was the comics magazine anthology, which they did in black and white. And because it was a magazine and not a comic book, it meant you could do it without the approval of the comics code. The publisher, Martin Goodman of Marvel at the time, was totally against it. Like, hey, we're going to piss somebody off at the Comics Code Authority. It's going to ruin everything. Stan Lee pushed for it, and we're lucky we got it because it led us to some of the great Conan we ever saw and some other really cool characters in Savage Tales as well. But I'll get into it. This opening page really sets the tone here for this story. And the one I want to look at is called The Frost Giant's Daughter. There are some other really like famous Barry Windsor-Smith stories in this mid-70s, early to mid-70s era, Red Nails being one of them. But I really like The Frost Giant's Daughter. You get this like post-battle scene here where it's already all happened. And then just in the distance, you can barely make them out. Two warriors, right? Standing on this otherwise barren wasteland of a battlefield. And then it kind of just begins to develop. And by the way, Roy Thomas, who later takes over editorial duties at Marvel after Stan Lee, he writes this, and Barry Windsor-Smith has spoken on the, what the process was like. And he's a guy who's spoken a lot about the difficulties of working at the big publishers like Marvel and how little creative control and creative freedom you have as an artist. And he's himself said that in these days, Roy Thomas told him what to draw and he drew it. And that's exactly what you get here. But his style has already evolved in such a way that the line work has become a lot more intricate and a lot more concise and detailed. Yes, you do get these like real action poses, these real like superheroic, action figure poses. The Kirby influence on him is not lost. And guys, I'm sure I'm going to show in the early parts of this video a bunch of Barry Smith, Conan the Barbarian, Kirby, just so you can see the side by side. But this is a real developing Barry Windsor-Smith. And what an awesome first page it is too, like all this death everywhere and Conan the Barbarian being introduced here in real like stone letters almost. And of course, this battle takes place, and where you get some of the greatness, like where it starts to come out that this is not just a Kirby inspired artist, working in the Marvel bullpen like so many others were, is in these different panels, these different points of view that he takes. Just the hair, right? We're going to start to see later on in other video, I'm going to talk about Barry Windsor-Smith's monsters and Barry Windsor-Smith's Weapon X. And we're going to see this kind of thing become a real feature of his, like the way he does hair, the very fine lines, this like real expressive way. When I was reading about it earlier, I read about how the pre-Raphaelite artists of Britain, like in the 1800s, were a big influence on him too. And they really start to come out later on. Like as he improves as an artist, the influences on him begin to show further, right? The more difficult, the more fine the influences begin to come forth, and you just start to see them here. Now, if pre-Raphaelite doesn't mean anything to you, gosh, there's so much I want to say about this page. If pre-Raphaelite doesn't mean anything to you, think of the painting of Ophelia after she's died, after she's drowned, from Hamlet, or Galahad, or that statue of that man, that old Roman statue, and he's like all wrapped up by snakes. He's like in complete agony. He's like all Laocoon or whatever his name is. There's a pre-Raphaelite painting of that too. And there's another one. The Death of King Arthur is an awesome painting. So anyway, you get the first appearance of Atali here too, the Frost Giant's daughter. She features in and out of Conan stories. And what I really think is cool about how she's introduced is you get the very like rugged and solo warrior, and then this super soft creature appears. The lines on her face and the lines in her eyes and so on are much softer, much more delicate. The way she's drawn compared to Conan, that's on purpose. Like, you have this side by side of masculinity and femininity, of masculinity and almost fantasy, right? Like, is she really there? Is this a wisp? Does this really exist? What is this that's come out of nowhere on this, the deathly cold of this frosty battlefield? And I love, by the way, not only is this a great panel, but this is a freaking awesome, incredible, can you think for a second, in modern comics, in an Ultimate Spider-Man, in an Absolute Batman, of a panel as, definitively good artistically as this? It's like taking the form of comic books and lifting it to the point of painting, almost Renaissance painting, the extension of the eyebrow and the flowing of the hair and the way he's looking out at you, the reader yourself. I think it's real masterfully done. Not only that, but earlier, Barry Windsor-Smith, when he was just Barry Smith working on Conan the Barbarian and doing his best Jack Kirby impression, the panels and the pages have a lot less detail. They're really like kind of blank, that action figure-y Jack Kirby blocky style. Not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I'm a huge Jack Kirby fan, but there's an evolution to Barry Windsor-Smith, and you see it here when he pulls in tight on certain areas and then pulls out to show you the entire scope of things, right? And then pulls back in again to draw in details. Of course, yes, there is still the action poses. I mean, look at that's a Jack Kirby pose. These action poses of the action figure, the superhero are there. And we're going to see a little bit more of it with the introduction of Atali's brothers. But even so, right? This might be Kirby, but this is not. You see what I mean? We're gonna, when I do that full episode, guys, when I show you like from beginning to end, Conan the Barbarian in 1970, all the way to Monsters in 2022, and you get to see the breadth of the Barry Windsor-Smith art progression, it'll be really clear like how incredible a development he makes. And again, here are some great Kirby-esque sorts of faces when the brothers are introduced. And then of course you have that whiplashing, motion blurring, action-packed sequence where the brothers attack Conan. The hand emerging from the panel, again, super Kirby, super block-like, super almost abstract, monstrous in a way. And again, the face so expressive for so few details. He does it a few times. Incredible moments here, like where the brothers are defeated. Come on, it's Conan. He doesn't lose battles. And then I really like when he grabs her and there's this like, look at the shape she takes as she's almost disappearing into, what is it even? It makes you want, the thing with Barry Windsor-Smith is you can look at his pages, you can look at his pages even after you've read them and you can just look like you're standing in a museum in front of a painting. And that's rare, right? That we stop on a page. Guys, how fast did we all read Invincible, for example? Not that there's anything wrong with the art in Invincible, but we flew through Invincible, all 3 compendiums. Who else? You don't fly through Barry Windsor-Smith. And it's not just because of the art, as we're gonna see later on. There's more to it than that, but look at the art for what it is too. It's an incredible extra level than we usually see in comics. And I love these panels when he comes out just to show us what there is all around them. You have this so tight moments and then he comes out to show you perspective, right? Like what else is there? What's around here? What's happening? And this almost shape-shifting event where Atali becomes what she truly is, where she goes to the stars. Like just look at this. You have the pillar here, whatever it is, almost like the obelisk. What am I thinking of? Basilisk, obelisk. Guys, help me. The monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then this transformative moment, like you get a little bit of that Kirby crackle back there, what they're calling the witch fires here. And then Atali, as she changes, like fantastically shoots into the stars, this blast of light. Conan is overwhelmed by it. Look at this panel where we're taken away from things to see just the scope. The high ridge mountains crumble, crushed beneath some strong and wrathful hand. What is it even? And then Conan drops. And when he's discovered, it's almost as if it's never happened. What happened to you? Cimmerian, right? Huh? Giants? Who? What? It was Atali, the frost giant's daughter. And all that's left of her, it's like it's almost imagination. Like, was it a dream? That, relaying that in a comic book, making it so your character lives through something, and then that not only to you, but to them, you can think about not only to you, but to them, was it like a dream? And then this last page where he's still holding where he grabbed her earlier on, I showed you, that veil, that wisp of gossamer that was never spun by human distaff. Wow. And the end. Guys, the Frost Giant's daughter, what a piece of work it is. And that's something I'm gonna probably keep saying. And it continues into Red Nails. And Red Nails is such a long story. It's such an amazing story that I could go on and on here. But we'll stop ourselves there for now. If you're a Barry Windsor-Smith guy, stay tuned because there's a bunch more stuff I have planned, like a whole series. I'm thinking this idea, the worlds of Barry Windsor-Smith, or the worlds of Jack Kirby, or Akira Toriyama, or Todd McFarlane, or whatever. I think it can be a really cool, like, artist edition, artist deep dive, instead of just the single issues. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm thinking I'm going to maybe go in that direction, try some of these nice, bigger episodes, as well as these shorter ones with your single issue deep dives. So anyways, guys, if you've been enjoying the content so far, remember to subscribe because there's tons more to come. And that's the show for today. I'm Dill Comic Books. Stay tuned and see you next week.